Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Stephanie, and I'm Deputy Mayor, and I'm chairing the meeting tonight. Mayor Colberg couldn't be with us. She's in a very important meeting with our Premier. So I just wanted to remind everybody this Saturday, 4 to 7 p.m. downtown is our Festival of Lights. We're going to be lighting up the big Christmas tree. So please feel free to come down and join us. Tom, you were going to tell us something about the amp?
Tom, you're muted.
It's better when I turn the microphone on. Yeah, the Badlands Amphitheater continues its next weekend of lights out at the amphitheater. They have a very interesting weekend this weekend with big band, and then they have all sorts of things like gingerbread cookies and gingerbread house contests and all sorts of activities out there this weekend. So once you're finished downtown, go on out to the amp.
Thanks, Tom. And Patrick, you have an announcement?
I just want to say, that the forecasts are showing more snow this weekend and heavy snowfall warnings. The RCMP have also issued a winter driving advisory, so just be careful on the highways out there as you start to enjoy the holiday season.
Thank you. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Crystal?
I move that council adopt the agenda for the November 21st, 2024 special meeting of council as presented.
Seconder? Patrick, thank you. All in favor? Perfect. Thanks, you guys. Moving on to 3.1.1, proposed Nachmine 8th Street road closure revised bylaw 04.24. Daryl.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the before you is the second reading of bylaw 0424, which is the closure of 8th Street in Nachmine. So this is part of our flood mitigation project. We have gone through the first reading and a public hearing. There were a few comments, or one comment back from it. That was then taken to the Minister of Transportation, who signed off on the road closure. They found no issues with it or concerns. And now it's back before council for the second and preferred third reading as well. And so we need to be able to close this in order to consolidate the land for our berms in Nachmine that we'll be constructing next year.
Thanks, Daryl. Can I get a motion? Patrick?
I move that council give second reading to revised bylaw 04.24 Nachmine 8th Street road closure as presented.
Thank you. Seconder?
Tony.
Any comments? Okay, all in favor? Thank you. Passed. Can I get a motion for third and final reading? Tom?
Yeah, I move that council give third and final reading to revised bylaw 04.24 Nachmine 8th Street road closure as presented.
Seconder. Crystal? Comments? All in favor? Thank you.
The next request for decision on our list is 05.24 Nachmine Hunter Drive road closure. So this is also a flood related road closure, and we are closing the east end of Hunter Drive between 9th Street and Highway 575. As you can see from the drawing on the page, we're basically going to close the road immediately to the east of the Nachmine lift station, create a cul-de-sac there so people who are traveling eastbound can do a turnaround on there. And the reason we're doing this is because the Nachmine berm will cross Hunter Drive at that location, and tie into the highway, basically. So it will create a barrier there. What we're proposing is that the roadway on Hunter Drive east of this turnaround will be removed, except for the area where we're going to create we will keep the trail that exists there right now as part of the extension of the trail system in Drumheller. So,
Thanks, Daryl. Can I get a motion? Patrick?
I move that council give second reading to bylaw 05.24 Knackmine Hunter Drive road closure as presented.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? Crystal?
Yeah, I'm just glad to hear that the pathway system, because that was definitely brought up. Actually, one of the open houses last year about the residents that were concerned that they would have to not be able to have access to the pathways. So just reiterate to all those residents, the pathway will continue along. So
Thanks, Crystal. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Can I get a motion for third and final reading? Tom?
Yeah, I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 05.245, Knackmine Hunter Drive road closure as presented.
Seconder? Tony? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. On to 3.1.3. Daryl?
thank you again, Your Worship. So bylaw 39.24, which is a revision of bylaw 21.24, is in front of you. And in there are a couple of attachments. And so this was actually brought before council and passed earlier this year. So I'm just trying to recall when. And subsequent to that, we discovered that there was a couple of errors. Primarily, we discovered that the contractor had built a bit of the berm on private property that is at the end of the street. And so we've had to acquire that little strip of property from the property owner. And we want to be able to, this amending bylaws to be able to include that into our environmental reserve lands and have, so this is to have all three readings of this bylaw because we've passed this in principle, but this is just the little additional piece to it. So,
Thanks, Daryl. Can I get a motion for first reading? Patrick?
I move that council give first reading to bylaw 39.24 amending bylaw for bylaw 21.24.
Seconder? Crystal? All in favor? Perfect. Passed. Can I get a motion for second reading? Tony?
I move that council give second reading to bylaw number 39.24, amending bylaw for bylaw number 21.24.
Seconder? Tom? Any comments?
Tom has a question.
Oh, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering how this can happen. How do we build something on land that we don't own? Was it somebody's fault or just an accident of some kind? Or
Yes, yes to both. To be frank, right? It's a bit of the the contractor and consultant in charge of that project should have caught this and didn't until months after it was constructed. And I think that part of the challenge is that we didn't take 50% of their yard. It was a very small sliver. And that sometimes in dirt work that can happen where boundaries a little bit fluid. However, this should have been captured before we had brought 21.24 to council. And it was actually alerted to us by the property owner of the property who thought that maybe we had encroached on their property. So yeah, this is absolutely on all of us to have made this right the first time, and we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Crystal?
Yeah, just in the summary of it, it talks about a portion of the land from a gas regulator site as well.
Yeah, so that's the lot that's next door to it. So it's also a piece of land that I think in the first go around when we did 21.24, we didn't include it in part because we didn't need the piece from the property next door to it. So if you look at the original 21.24, because we weren't encroaching on on that parcel, we didn't really need a piece of that regular station, but because of the additional lands required, we do need a piece of it, so.
All in favor? Thank you, carried. Can I get a motion? Perfect, Patrick?
I move the council give unanimous consent for third reading of bylaw 39.24, amending bylaw for bylaw 21.24.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? All in favor? Okay, thank you. And can I get a motion for third and final? Crystal?
I move that council gives third and final reading to bylaw number 39.24, amending bylaw for bylaw number 21.24.
Seconder? Tony? Any comments? All in favor? Thank you, carried. Moving on to 3.2.1, urban tree planting study. And I believe we have Spencer and Mike here. Thank you.
There you go. Hi, Council. My name is Spencer Robertson. I'm a project engineer with the Drumheller Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Office. I'm here today to present on the Urban Forest Implementation and Management Report. 3 years ago, the Flood Office prepared the Urban Forest Standards and Techniques document. This provides an outline of the primary objectives and outcome-based guidelines for the urban forest of the Drumheller Valley. The Flood Office has since identified some gaps in areas that require further information. As such, the Flood Office hired Green Drop Tree Care through a RFP procurement process to develop an implementation plan building off the previous report. Joining me today is Mike Leung and Matt Bennett from Green Drop Tree Care, who will present the findings of their report. Some background on the project. The intent of the Urban Forest Implementation Plan is to review the existing planting conditions in the Drumheller Valley, identify supplementary planting locations, seek public input on priority areas, and assess the viability of these areas, as well as help the town prepare short-term and long-term budget planning for the planting and maintenance of new trees. The report provides an overview of the challenges for planting and maintaining vegetation in the valley, and also provides recommendations on how to adapt to potential future climate change. Green Drop also reviewed some recently planted vegetation and provided recommendations to improve the establishment for future plantings and to better maintain the existing urban forest. A public consultation survey was also completed to gather public input on 11 proposed planting locations. The survey results were used to prepare planting maps based on priority, along with recommended species for each location. The intent is for these maps to be used by the town to select locations and species. The report also provides an overview of potential funding opportunities that the town could pursue to fund the urban forest plan, as well as partnerships to implement community workshops, as well as tree planting programs to encourage private residents to plant more trees, provide them with the knowledge and skills to take care of them. A budget recommendation is also provided in the report to give a high-level estimate of the costs associated with implementing the urban forest plan and to help with future budget planning. These costs include the cost to plant and maintain new trees, as well as implement some of the recommendations in the report, such as completing a GIS tree inventory and community outreach programs. I'm now going to hand it over to Matt and Mike from Green Drop Tree Care to present the findings of the report. Matt?
Hi, Spencer. Thank you. And thanks, ladies and gentlemen from council for hearing our presentation today. I think everyone had a copy of the report we prepared, which is 40-page report. So maybe, yeah, maybe it wasn't, maybe you didn't have time to go over the whole thing. So if you didn't, we're going to provide a summary today of our findings. So yeah, it was a pleasure being involved in doing this plan and looking around your beautiful town. It was very interesting, and we're hoping we can be of some help in having you helping you have a beautiful tree canopy for years to come. So some of the challenges and recommendations that we identified in the town was the limited rainfall, which I think everyone who lives there is aware of. It's different from other places in Alberta, and the soil is similar to other places in Alberta, but unique. Because I'm sure you're all aware of what's buried beneath your soil in your unique town. And some challenges as well is because of your kind of like urban location, you have a lot of, we found that there was a lot of animal damage on newly planted trees, which is very expensive. Yeah, we also found on newly planted trees and also trees planted years ago that they weren't planted properly. We'll get into that later, but there was some very serious errors in planting that will cause mortality, or at least stunted growth of the trees in later years. And another one of the challenges that we saw for Drumheller and other places as well is climate change. And so what we would recommend for some of these challenges, as far as the rainfall goes, limited rainfall, it really should be a cost-saving measure to consider a tracking app that's pictured here. So this is an example of an app that monitors watering of each tree. In order to do that, you would have to have a complete inventory of trees, or at least of your newly planted trees, and we'll talk about that a bit more later. We go into that in some detail in the report. But it would be really a cost saving measure to implement a watering tracking, so you know how often the trees are being watered, and then you can verify that they're being watered. Another recommendation would be species selection. That's really important in drought conditions, to select trees that thrive well in your conditions, and that would mean mostly native trees that you would find naturally here, mostly, but not exclusively limited to. And we also recommended in a report that a maintenance period on newly planted tree is extended. I think currently it's a year, and that's just not enough to get a new tree planted. The cost of a tree and the value of the tree, to kind of leave it on its own after a year is just, it's not smart economics. And as far as the challenge of many of your trees being attacked by animals, deer, beaver, etc., a solution to that, or at least some protection for that, would be installing tree protection fences, as is pictured there. And that would save a lot of money from mortality of trees. The deep planting, as you can see in the picture there, the circle, that tree is planted at least half the length of a trowel too deep. And while that might not seem important, it really is. Like, picture when you plant a tree from seed, it sets its roots out, and in that process, that tree is establishing itself for life, and it's establishing how it can get oxygen from the surface. So when it's planted too deep, that tree really is never given a fighting chance. It might survive, but will never be a real tree. So it's really important. The most important part of a tree's life, as far as transplanting or planting them, is the initial installation, and it's much more important than people give that credit for. So how that could be done is, I mean, I guess it's a matter of training. You could have specifications in planting tenders, and you could also have a supervising arborist that would ensure that they were planted correctly and that maintenance was done correctly. Another recommendation was a GIS or a electronic-based inventory, which is really important. So if we're talking about managing trees or cars or anything, the first thing you need to do is know what you have and where it is, and that's the most effective way to manage it. So by having an inventory, you would be able to track species, where they are, problems with the trees, maintenance programs, and as I said previously, you can monitor and track a maintenance program. And again, we would really encourage continuing public engagement with your tree planting program, in your town, and implementation of a tree group that would kind of oversee or at least encourage these things with residents, and encourage things like public funding for the trees. And importance of that has been successful everywhere I've ever been. And I mean, and research shows those kinds of groups can really impact the canopy of your town. I'm going to talk about the next slide is as I spoke, the public consultation, or getting public buy-in, is really important, especially if you're spending money. It's really important to get the public to buy into the importance of trees and the economic benefits. And I mean, you'll find, as we found in the public consultation, that lots of people in Drumheller were interested in trees and where they go, and how many we're going to put in. So we did that from July to mid-August. We promoted in radio, newspaper, social media. We contacted things like schools, community associations, golf courses, and that was done both online and in paper forms. We had identified 11 sites that we asked the public to comment on and give their opinions on, and rank the sites in order of their vision of importance. And so we got 94 online responses, which was great for a town your size, for the population. 3 paper forms. And the summary of the findings was overwhelmingly community support for trees, which is not always the case from these findings. Strong desire for more trees and shrubs, and people really interested in them in frequently used areas of the town. And some newly identified sites that we hadn't identified was the rail to trail pathway system, which several people thought would really benefit from shading and a canopy. I can imagine that. I can imagine that trail on a plus 30 day. And the disc golf area was also identified. And again, some collaborative opportunities we saw was to engage school and community associations. I mean, not necessarily have, but there's organizations such as Trees Winnipeg, Stop Dead Alberta, all kinds of community organizations that kind of drive planting programs and just general appreciation for trees in towns such as yours. So I won't go through all this. This is in the report, but this is a short list of trees that we recommend for planting in Drumheller. And boy, that looks really short, doesn't it? And that's kind of what we got when you live where we do in the climate that we do. But there is some trees planted around the town that we wouldn't recommend for hardy trees that will survive harsh conditions. But this is pretty much the list of things that will do well under our conditions. It would be good to stick to that list. I mean, lots of municipalities and cities, I'm sure you're aware, have lists that they put on their forestry website or their town website about recommended trees there. So, people aren't wasting their time and planting kind of strange trees that will never survive in Drumheller. And sorry, I just want to get this bigger on my screen so I can see it. So these were locations that were identified for planting. I know this is really a snapshot of it. If you like to look at it in more detail, it's in the report, in the 40-page report. But those locations A, B, C, D to M are the Midland Community Hall, Boulevard near Midland Bar, St. Anthony School, Boulevard between North Dinosaur Trail, Poplar Crescent, the former Dinalicious property, new 500 wing at Drumheller Seniors Foundation, rail to trail, the cemetery entrance, the disc golf location. We added two of these, as we said, green space and new part of Bankville playground area, Green Tree School, and new part of the cemetery. Now, I mean, this is not to say that these are the only places in the town you could plant trees, obviously, but they're locations that are suitable for trees, would support new plantings of trees, and would be beneficial to the public. And through our survey, we found that a lot of people agreed with this location and thought there was a need for trees there or new plantings there. Those locations are NOP, the floodway reservation zone is in N. O is the LEA floodway rehabilitation zone, and East Cooley near the water fill station. And those are some places we identified that could use many trees. So maybe in some of those places we would recommend you don't plant necessarily bigger or more expensive trees, and you could do kind of a seedling project there as long as was maintained. Because again, whether it's a big tree or a small tree, there is no point planting a tree if no one's coming back to watering it. So we always like to look at an overall plan. We never look at the cost of a tree to install in the ground. We look at cost of tree, the installation, and the maintenance, and that part is so important, and it should always be included when you're looking at cost of planting. So again, these are another 500 wing at the Seniors Foundation. Not many trees there, and the rail to trail public walkway area. We would propose just some really hardy native species there: spruce, green ash, American elm, Schubert cherry, and Amur maple, which some of them, and trembling aspens, which are all native to the area, and would if properly planted and looked after in those locations would thrive. So I know there's funds in place for tree-related projects from your flood restoration funding, but some of the things we know of and have identified, and I'm sure people like your folks are aware of these things, and I'm sure Spencer certainly is, but these are ways to tap into. These are just some of the ways you could tap into funding to increase your canopy in Drumheller. The Green Municipal Fund. There's a huge amount of money there for municipalities that want to increase their canopy cover, and that comes from the federal government, and that is administered by the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And lots of communities are tapping into that successfully. And a great partner to have in all of this is Tree Canada, who's a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing canopy cover and care of trees across Canada. And they provide grant money to schools and private plantings and so on. And they are a great resource to partner with if you were to partner with Tree Canada and say, hey, we have a lot of land, we want trees, our community wants trees, they're a great partner to tap into and help write grants. A lot of Tree Canada's funding goes to schools. So if you wanted to put some trees on schools, I mean, it is really a rubber stamp affair to have money from Trees Canada's Greening School Grounds Fund. And another resource is the International Society of Arboriculture, which is a good resource for public outreach, for kind of bridging the gap between professionals and public. And they do things. Mike and I are both on the board of ISA, so I'm going to say we. Is nonprofit organization, and we do things such as Relief, which we outlined in the presentation, in the report to you. But that is a great program that distributes low cost trees from nurseries to the general public. So as much as you want to put trees on public land, it's also super important to keep in mind that we want to plant trees on private property as well, because if a big tree falls on public property, everybody notices it, and we say, oh, we have to replace that tree. But when that happens on private property, there's little attention paid to that if there isn't motivation on the homeowner's part. So Relief is a great way to distribute trees at low cost to residents and encourage them to plant properly and to maintain them. In Winnipeg, for instance, we distribute literally thousands of low-cost trees to private residents annually. And another great way to have, to have more buy-in from your community is holding events such as Arbor Day. Arbor Day, which is the day once a year that commemorates tree planting around the world and encourages tree planting. So many communities hold Arbor Day festivals that involve kids and adults and just promotes tree planting. So this is so yeah, what does this cost? So this is just a kind of a summary of the costs that we assume you would be looking at to do some of these things. So if you're looking at watering and maintaining, say 200 trees a year, or 150 trees a year, you would be looking at about $200 a tree per year. And I know that sounds a lot, but it's not really to ensure that the survival of a tree, that if you don't water it, you're just going to end up doing the same thing over again, which then triples the cost. But this kind of thing, maintenance of trees can be funded by GMF and Tree Canada if it's part of a planting project. A GIS monitoring program or a GPS monitoring program, which would be part of your inventory perhaps, or just part of a monitoring system, would be about $1,300 a year. That ensures you know where the trees are, you know how often they're being watered, and you have monitoring that whoever's going to be watering your trees is actually doing it. An inventory of the trees in your town, which records things like species you a picture. We showed you the picture earlier on, and there's a little bit more of an explanation or a report. And a very important component of managing your trees or anything is an inventory. So for a place the size of Drumheller, that's about an $18,000 cost, we think. And an example of if you were to plant, say, 100 trees, 100 trees and 50 shrubs in total, I mean, with maintenance, you'd be looking at about, installation, you'd be looking at about $55,000 a year. And again, these things the costs can be significantly overridden by these types of grants. And the outreach we were talking about, a relief program would run you about $10,000 to distribute trees, but it's also recoupable because you're selling the trees, and in most cases, that kind of program is a cost recovery program, and the benefit is increasing your canopy cover. And there's support like that from people like Trees Canada. ISA can help implement those types of programs. I think the Arbor Day would be, or both those programs would be such a great program in Drumheller. And again, an Arbor Day, depending on the scale of it, a $10,000 Arbor Day would involve the whole town. Right on the scale of your lights festival is happening this weekend, but you could really do a very basic Arbor Day, just distributing trees and just education on the benefits of trees. Tree Canada supports those kind of things as well. And a school education program along with a planting program is really great. Get schools involved. They transfer this kind of appreciation for trees onto their up to their parents, hopefully. And again, Tree Canada is very supportive of those types of programs. And that would conclude my part of it. Mike and I worked together. Mike Leong and Spencer and I worked together on this project. Mike was mostly the boots on the ground person, so to speak, and I consulted on a lot of things with it. But again, Mike did most of the hard work and picked my brain. But I'm going to turn it over to him. Now, I don't know if you have questions, if you want me to answer questions now, or we'll wait to the end. It's your meeting, so you can do whichever part, but I'll turn this part over to Mike now.
I think we have finished the presentation. We are entering the Q&A section now.
Thank you so much, guys. Thanks for all the hard work and the public engagement you put into this. Does council have any questions? Crystal?
Yeah, just a couple. So last year, Green Tree School actually did get some trees, and they actually involved the grade 5 and 6 class to actually do all the planning. So they had to go out and measure the distance between the trees, what types of trees, and Dagan was definitely involved in that. I'm not sure if Spencer was as well, but it was a really great way for the kids to get involved in that tree planting. And now the school actually takes care of the trees, so they're watering them, they're making sure that they're staying alive, doing the trimming and everything. So that has been a really great example of the use of the flood mitigation trees for that project. But my question is in regards to actually the fundings and collaborations. So say Green Tree School would like more trees, and I know they do because they have some more extra space. Would they be the ones applying for this Tree Canada Greening Canada school grounds, or is the flood mitigation applying for it on their behalf and then providing the trees? Like, how does that all work and tie in together?
Well, if you submit it, the school would submit the application through Tree Canada. The best and fastest way to go would be to apply through Tree Canada in their school program. So I mean, it's not a difficult process. So it's not. I mean, I wouldn't compare it to applying for a federal government or provincial government grant. They really want to help. So if you were to approach them, say what you want to do, they would ask you questions like a drawing of the school, amount of space for trees, and then they would help with things like species selection, and then they would want you to hire a qualified contractor to plant and maintain them. So for instance, if you had a drawing of a school that had, say, half an acre of useful space, they would ask you for, and they could help you with that too. Or I mean, we could also help with that as well. We could help with the initial kind of building blocks of that part. But it is, I'd say it's a relatively simple process, and the schools can do it on their own. They can buy trees and dig holes and do it on their own. But in a lot of cases, in some cases, depending on the location, the Tree Canada will want a certain size of trees, which might be limiting to students doing that, the big trees where you need machinery to do it. Or it could also be a container type program where trees are more manageable. But the factor in all of that is there has to be an identifiable maintenance program associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you. Couple of things. Very good presentation. I planted many trees in the valley over the last 45 years or so. Some grow, some don't. It's always a challenge in the valley. I remember when I was very young, like a grade 2 or grade 3 class in Edmonton, every kid on Arbor Day got a little spruce 6-inch kind of tree. And I remember planting it in our yard in Edmonton, and those trees are still there. And that's 60 plus years ago. So that was, I think that's a great idea. My question, however, is the inventory. I was golfing on a golf course out in Victoria a couple of years ago, Royal Colwood, and they have massive trees on their golf course. and they have an exceptional tree inventory. They literally have inventoried every single tree on their golf course. They have it described. It has a full page in a binder in terms of the kind of tree it is, the age, when it was planted, when the life expectancy, when it might have to be replaced, et cetera, et cetera. Now, are you suggesting that we do that with the thousands of trees that we have in the valley here? I can't imagine doing that for $18,000.
Yeah, I mean, your inventory is limited to what you would like to do. That cost estimate is really realistic for doing public trees in Drumheller. I mean, you could expand it, and often, say, forested areas they're not treated as individual trees, they're treated as forest stands. But in the case of towns and cities, very similar to what you're describing from the golf course, other than it's not in a binder, it's now electronic, but the binder sounds really neat. You can just go and open it up. I like that. It's all electronic now, so we had some examples earlier on in the presentation, and there's some examples of just what it looks like in the report. But yeah, basically you map all public trees, and it's GIS and technology makes it a lot faster now. But it's done by arborists, and you locate every tree, mark it on a GPS map, and identify the species, the size. You can do whatever you want. You can even value the tree. Trees have an inherent value. So if you planted a tree for $500 20 years ago, it's worth much more than its replacement cost. It has a value to it. We can do that as well, and that's a lot of cities use that tool, the value of their trees, when they're applying for funding and so on, when they're looking at the value of their canopy. But so you can do that in an inventory. You can also do risk assessments on trees. You can do maintenance on trees. Does it have potential insect or disease? Does it need pruning? And what's the pruning cycle for those trees? So all those things can be done. It's limited to what you want to see there. But $18,000 approximately would give you a really clear inventory of your town, and it's a super useful, important tool to have if you're starting to manage your forest or your canopy properly.
Patrick?
So my answers are very long-winded.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm really happy about the public engagement. I'm just curious, in your experience, I've seen different stewardship programs in other communities, like planting on the boulevard, having residents, either adopt it or look after it for a certain amount of time. Have you seen much success in those type of programs, or?
I'd have to say no. Having people engaged and involved in it, so in the planting or in the planning, and engaged in what they're doing in their community, really works. That works really well. But as far as maintenance, it's best left to a program of somewhat the town either doing it and it being monitored, or a contractor and it's being monitored. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you're speaking from experience, but I've seen just so many times public projects where they relied on homeowners to water just have failed.
Okay. And I guess looking beyond this program, what do you see municipalities doing in mitigating like heat sink areas in new developments or industrial areas? Is that something they do through development, or is that something we could do on our property to help mitigate that, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's not just because you have a location is not always a great location for a tree. So I think those things like that are best managed by site selection. So just as much as species selection is important, site selection is important, and knowing what you have there. And new developments are especially tricky for establishing new trees.
Thank you so much, Spencer, Mike, and Matt. We really appreciate you coming in and giving us a summary of that report.
Okay, thank you. We loved being around your town and seeing your great town and your trees, and we wish you the best with your growing your urban forest.
Oh, sorry, Crystal's got one more comment.
Just for the public, if they are looking at the slideshow, it is duplicated pages 45 to 55. It's a duplicate of some other pages. So just if people are wondering, why does this seem double, it is. So thanks.
We're going to move on to 3.2.2 and invite Graham up to present. Sorry, Mike, if you and Matt can go too. If you guys want to go, you're more than welcome to go now. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Council, for having me to present this. My name is Graham Waugh. I'm a project engineer with the Drumheller Resiliency and Flood Mitigation Office, working with Dagan and Spencer and many others. The first request for decision I am here to present on is to seek approval to write off outstanding property taxes for properties that were acquired this year through the flood program. And the background on this is that through expropriation of properties, the property taxes are not always accounted for in the deal when and credited from the price. So what ended up happening for some properties is that that property tax that was owed by the previous owner was not subtracted from the sale price. So the town basically paid and didn't get the credit of taxes owed. Now, so the point now with expropriations, those property taxes that are left owing or that are overpaid in some cases by the owner, if they've paid for the whole year, those are usually settled as damages through the land and property tribunal hearing process. So in the case where the town has not collected or received all of the taxes that may have been owing on those properties, there's a chance to attempt to recover some of those through that hearing process. But at this time, the goal is to clear up the taxes on these, the taxes that are showed as owing on these tax rolls. And this is for 4 separate properties, which cover 8 separate tax rolls. So one of the properties in Lehigh has 5 separate tax roll lines on it. So there's 2 separate properties in Lehigh, 1 in East Cooley and 1 in Nackmine. So the outstanding taxes from those properties that are currently on the books that we are recommending are cleared up is $7,109.34. So the current financial impact of that, of writing off those taxes, would be $7,109.34. A portion of which of these can be attempted to be recovered during the property and land tribunal process.
Thanks, Graham. Can I get a motion, Council?
Can we ask questions before the motions? No, it has to be each individually one. There's several motions.
But I guess, do you have a global question?
Yeah, about all of them. So this is the total loss of property tax per year for the community of Lehigh that we will in the future losing. Is just that amount, or
No,
No.
so what,
Okay.
what happens is property tax, what, Victoria, you wanted to take it?
No, this $7,000 is including some of the penalties as well. And this is not the foregone revenues. The foregone revenues is a different exercise.
Thank you.
Council? Oh, Patrick? Perfect.
I'll move the council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $212 for tax roll number 15007800.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion for the next one? Crystal?
I move that council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $98.97 for the tax roll number 15008006.
Seconder. Tony? Any comments? All in favor? Perfect. Thanks, guys. Can I get a motion for the next one? Tom?
I move that council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $678.38 for tax roll number 15008204.
Seconder? Patrick? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion for the next one? Patrick?
I move the council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $98.97 for tax roll number 15008402.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion for the next? Tony?
I move that council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $127.17 for tax roll number 15008600.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion for the next? Tom?
Yeah, I move that council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $1,413.24 for tax roll number 14003206.
Seconder? Patrick? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion for the next one? Patrick?
I move the council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $1,455.70 for tax roll number 15007404.
Seconder? Crystal? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. A motion for the next one? Tony?
I move that council approve the write-off of outstanding property taxes in the amount of $3,024.91 for tax roll number 17045619.
Seconder? Patrick? Any comments? All in favor? Carried. We're going to move on to 3.2.3, and Graham, you have the floor.
Thank you, Council. And there'll be less motions on this one, so thank you. I'm here to present a second request for decision regarding seeking approval to pursue funding through a provincial grant program called the Drought and Flood Protection Program, DFPP. And the purpose of this, of the application we're presenting to apply for, is to help fund adaptive flood protection measures. So you might have heard of adaptive berms or adaptive fill. And these are measures that are recommended in specific areas where a permanent berm could not feasibly be built. In some cases, it's a road crossing, or there's an example like at the Star Mine Suspension Bridge, there's the path and there's guy wires coming down where the berm is, as well as downtown, there's some subsurface conditions, environmental conditions, where putting in a permanent earth fill berm on top of that is not recommended. So there's these select spots throughout Midland, Newcastle, downtown, and Rosedale, where what's recommended is these what are called adaptive flood protection measures, so they can be installed and removed, installed before a forecasted flood event and then removed after. Now, the funding opportunity is well aligned with this, and so we would be proposing to apply for a total of $445,000. Under this funding program, the applicant's required to provide 30% matching contribution. So that would require the town or the flood program to commit an estimated $134,000 to support the remainder of the funding, to go along with the remainder of the funding. And now this would take the flood mitigation program beyond the $5 million commitment. And so the additional funding would need to come from borrowing or financing. So the recommendation, the request from council is to support the application for this application to the the DFPP funding program, and with the commitment to provide those funds, $134,000. I can provide more context on the adaptive flood protection measures. They are outlined in this request for decision. The measures would include an earthen or clay-filled berm, where in Midland and Newcastle, where the materials can be stockpiled on town-owned land, ready for use. So the purchase price would, a part of this funding would be to purchase the materials, have them stockpiled and ready to go. Now, when there's a forecasted flood event, those materials are already in the community and they could be quickly deployed to fill those portions of the berm. In Rosedale, the adaptive flood protection measure there is a stop log gate. So it's a gate kind of at the trail leading up to the bridge, where these aluminum kind of sections, boards would essentially be stacked up in this opening on a set of rails to block the flooding. Yeah, and that is, so I've discussed the financial impact of $134,000, which would require financing. And the workforce and resource impact this would be handled through the flood office and tendered out to contractors to procure the earth and fill and construct the protection measures. Yeah. As far as communication, we'll communicate back on the success of the grant if we are approved to pursue it.
Thank you, Graham. Council, can I get a motion? Tony?
I move that council approve the request for financial contribution of an additional $134,000 through borrowing should the flood office DFPP funding application for adaptive flood protection measures be successful.
Tom, you're a seconder? Perfect. Thank you. Any comments or questions, council? Patrick?
This may be premature for the question or whatever, but we are considering in the next one changes to the Nackmine berm. Is there areas there that would need storage space for adaptive fill too, potentially?
Thank you for the question. No, that part is not accounted for in this. That's adaptive flood measures are not being proposed at that section of the north end, upstream end of the Nack Mine berm.
Crystal?
Sorry, and when you were first talking, you were talking about some downtown infill. Is there any downtown infill required?
No. So
Okay.
the present application and what I have before you now is to support funding for earth and fill stockpiling in Midland and Newcastle, as well as a stop log gate in Rosedale. The bigger picture of adaptive flood protection includes a couple more sections where water-filled tubes are recommended. And they're a different technology, so we're navigating through how we can fit those into the funding applications. The costs of those are relatively smaller compared to the earth and fill, but they have very specific use in smaller areas. So
Okay.
I listed downtown because it is among the 7 locations where adaptive measures are being proposed.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. But another comment. So I'm specifically thinking of the Midland stockpile because the Badlands Trail Society has approached the town to build some type of bike skills park with some dirt jumps, and they have identified specifically that location as a potential to have it, especially now that the bridge is open, easy access for residents and visitors. And so if this does happen to go through, potentially they could use this dirt as a means to make something creative out of just a big mound of dirt. It's actually something usable. It's dirt. It can be taken apart and then they can rebuild it. So, and it would be up to the Badlands Trail Society to kind of help with that. And I know they're working towards some designs and some funding as well. So I'm excited about this one.
Thank you. Glad to hear.
Tom?
Yeah, thank you. That was kind of my question, what Crystal asked there. My suggestion, for example, in Newcastle, rather than having just a big pile of dirt, shape it in such a way that you might want to have a toboggan slide. That's something that it wouldn't cost very much, and because we get so much snow in Drumheller now, we might be able to use that. So that was my other question was, so I'm not clear on why this was not included in the big picture flood mitigation program for Drumheller. Did we not anticipate that we would have to have adaptive fill? And did we not anticipate that it would cost X amount of dollars? I'm not sure where that came from.
All right, yeah, thank you. Good question. So yeah, as the program has developed, engineering teams have found certain areas when they've gotten into detailed design that are going to benefit from these measures. So it has evolved. It's not that these wouldn't have been known, but these sites and these specific techniques with earth and fill versus stop logs or water filled tubes, those have evolved. And this program, geotechnical consultant was retained this year to do a study on the more precise adaptive flood protection measures that would work in these locations and how to kind of help solve those. Yeah.
Thanks, Graham. Any other comments?
I think just to add to Graham's comment, to answer your question a bit more definitively, Tom. So this was always being considered. This is a grant opportunity that we're looking to get more money to fund a very specific thing that we think the province will fund. So this is why we're there was always stop logs planned for the Rosedale berm, but this is a way to try to get it funded through an additional grant to be able to stretch our dollars further.
Yeah, well put, Daryl. Thanks for explaining that.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Thanks, Graham. We're going to move on to 3.2.4, Dagan.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I am going to speak this evening to some changes that we're looking at for the Nack Mine berm project. And just sharing my screen here. we are getting through the Knackwine berm. The tender is out right now. You know, we have the final design. Our engineers have put together cost estimates. And we have been speaking with council a bit about the properties at the upstream end over the last probably 6 to 8 months in terms of acquiring that land. So that area that's circled here has been a bit of a challenge for the flood program, mostly to do with the boundaries of the property because it's bounded by the river or natural area, and there's some uncertainty in this area about which land is owned by the landowners and which is owned by the crown or the province there. So just zooming into that upstream end, this is the design that we have out for tender right now. We still don't have the land. We don't have control of it at this point, but we have been working through the expropriation process to acquire that. This section of berm is 150 meters long, and it was designed, you can see the light blue dash line, that's where the flood would be without the berm. So it was designed to protect the walkout basement on this one particular house at 287 First Street. And then the length of the berm that runs along 44 Second Avenue is for access egress, just because you don't want to put a little cul-de-sac at the end of the berm at the end of this lot. You need to be able to have truck traffic driving through both during construction and for maintenance, and as well during a flood emergency response. You need to have access there if you are looking to protect this one parcel. So because we have had these ongoing challenges, both with acquiring the land from the landowner, and recently as well, we met with the Alberta Government Public Lands. We have taken a second look at this area and the stretch of the berm. So if I step back to the original design here, back in March 2021, the berm actually originally ended at First Street. So that's where the flow gets into the community, is to the east of First Street. And then the engineers were out on site having a look, and they noticed that there was this walkout basement, the low point, and they extended the berm. To protect that area. And so because of the challenges that we're having with acquiring the land, we do need the land to get our regulatory approvals. We need the land to be able to build the berm. We did have a second look at it, and we realized that actually this area could be served a bit better with temporary measures. So things like sandbags or flood tubes. So it's not a long stretch that we need to protect. It is just a low point on one particular property. And perhaps that would be a better approach than building the 150 meters of the earthfill berm. And so as Graham mentioned, we are doing temporary earthfill in other areas, so it's not unheard of. And again, in this area, it would be probably a smaller fill, so we could manage with sandbags or earthfill. So what we're suggesting is that we cancel this 150 meters upstream section of berm, and we're going to bring that here to council today for decision. And if we do that, then that will allow us to abandon the 2 expropriation proceedings that we have ongoing for those 2 lots at the upstream end. And then the next steps, with the tender being out right now, we would just issue an addendum, and then the contractors would be bidding on a reduced amount of earthfill, a reduced length of berm. And we'd have to update our regulatory submission package as well, just to let them know that we are making this change to the berm. And in terms of communications, we would let the impacted landowners know. So our legal team would correspond with their legal team. And if we do move forward with the expropriation abandonments, the requirement there is to advertise those in the local paper. And then the change overall to the berm would be communicated by our normal means, so website, social media, and newsletter. And that's what I had.
Thanks, Dagan. Can I get a motion? Crystal?
I move that council direct administration to take the necessary steps to adjust the alignment of the Nakmai berm to tie the upstream end of the berm to high ground at the intersection of First Street and Third Avenue.
Seconder, Patrick. Questions or comments? Crystal?
So specifically, we're only doing this because of the major problems determining the land boundaries because the river has changed over time. Province is saying, no, this is the land boundary, but the landowner is saying, no, it's this, so this is just, and in the end, it's really only the impacted with potential flooding is that one property because of the walkout basement, only that. So really, if we do have to put in protection, it's just basically just that property, not the second one, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So there's a risk to the project if we don't get the land, if we are still negotiating with the province on, what land and whose boundary and who owns what. And we don't want to delay the rest of the project. And it is going to be fairly straightforward to protect that one walkout basement. The second lot is the house is actually above the 200-year flood elevation. So it wouldn't require protection. So it would just be the one house that needs that temporary.
Well, thanks to your team for making these changes. It just makes sense for the whole community.
Thank you, Dagan. All in favor? Carried. 3.2.5, Dagan?
So given that we are not going to pursue building that upstream 150 meters of the berm, we're now able to move forward with abandoning the expropriations for the two impacted properties. So item 3.2.5 on the agenda is for the abandonment of the expropriation for 287 First Street in Nakmine. So you'll recall for both of these properties, we did bring them to council for notice of intention to expropriate and certificate of approval, and then that was rejected by the land titles office because of the boundary issue, and then we've since brought them back to council 2 additional times. But at this point, we are looking at abandoning the second certificate of approval and canceling the overall expropriation. And so again, this one is for 287 First Street. In terms of the costs, we would still we still need to pay for the landowner's legal fees for the expropriation proceedings to date. But that would be the limit of the financial responsibilities there. And then the next steps would be just to register the abandonment at land titles and communicate to the landowner and complete the advertising in the paper.
Thanks, Dagan. Can I get a motion? Crystal?
People. I move that council directs administration to abandon the notice of intention to expropriate for the partial taking signed and dated the 12th day of August 2024 pertaining to a portion of the parcel of land legally described as Plan Nakmine 7125DD, that portion of the southeasterly 31 and 40 hundredths 31.40 meters and perpendicular width of Block B, which lies to the northeast of the southwest 22 and 86 hundredths 22.86 meters of the said Block B, accepting thereout subdivision plan 9312239 containing 0.072 hectares, 0.180 acres more or less, title number 001142256, and take all necessary steps and execute all necessary documents required by the Expropriation Act, RSA 2000, Chapter E-13, as amended and furtherance of this abandonment.
Seconder? Patrick? Comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. Moving on to 3.2.6, Dagan?
So similarly, this is the request for decision for abandonment of the expropriation proceedings for 44 Second Avenue at Nakmine. So again, this is the parcel that the the berm was running at the back of the lot, and that was for access and egress on the berm. So we have just canceled that portion of the berm. So we are no longer in need of this parcel of land. And so we're recommending that we abandon the expropriation, and we will communicate with the landowners via their legal team and as well advertise this one in the newspaper. And again, we would be responsible for legal fees relating to the expropriation proceedings to date, but then no further financial costs after the abandonment.
Thank you, Dagan. Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Heather.
I move that council direct administration to abandon the notice of intention to expropriate for partial taking signed and dated the 12th day of August 2024 pertaining to a portion of the parcel of land legally described as Plan Nakamine 7125DD, Block B, excepting that portion which lies to the east of a line drawn parallel with and 103 in brackets feet perpendicularly distant northwesterly from the southeasterly boundary of said block, title number 061-102-801, and take all necessary steps and execute all necessary documents required by the Expropriation Act, RSA 2000, Chapter E-13, as amended in furtherance of this abandonment.
Seconder. Patrick, any questions or comments? All in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Heather?
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting, please.
Seconder? Crystal? All in favor? Carried. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.